yes, you can grieve someone you just broke up with, regardless if it was romantic or platonic, even when they have hurt you and you feel that they don't deserve your tears. And it's one of the most confusing types of grief out there. So we're going to get into it in this video. Please stay with me to the end of this video because I might say some things that you may not have considered before. So it's this notion out there that after we break up with somebody that did not treat us the best, that we just move on. We're supposed to say F them. We're supposed to go out with our friends and throw a revenge party. Or maybe we're supposed to find somebody new to kiss. Or in the case where it's platonic, a new bestie, a new friend to become besties with. And I'm not saying any of these things are inherently bad or wrong. Everyone is different, right? What I am saying though is that there are reasons to the responses behind this sort of breakup. Many people do experience post-breakup distress, regardless if the person that they are breaking up with, the relationship was romantic or platonic. A lot of the time it depends on the type of relationship, the longevity of the relationship, the closeness between the people, the cause of the breakup, the mental health of the individuals involved in the relationship, and the list goes on and on and on. Post-breakup distress is actually way more common than we think it is. And it actually can lead to heartbreak. And in fact, 82% of people experience heartbreak after a relationship ends. And you know what often comes with heartbreak? Grief. So my take is that, yes, we must grieve after a breakup, even when we don't care much about the person anymore. Before I jump into why we must grieve after a breakup, I want to touch on how you may be grieving and what exactly you might be grieving, because sometimes we're grieving and we don't even know that we're grieving. You might just feel like, what am I doing? Why am I upset? This person hurt me so badly. And you might even beat yourself up for feeling those things. And so that's why it's really important that we kind of understand like how we may be grieving and what we may be grieving. So firstly, how we may be grieving. So first and foremost, there may be several symptoms that we may be experiencing after a breakup. And they range from physical to emotional to behavioral to psychological. It's so many that we may be experiencing that we might not even understand. So in terms of emotional symptoms, sadness, depression, anger, disbelief. Physical symptoms, sleep disturbances, appetite changes, fatigue. Behavioral or psychological, memory loss. That one is one that is near and dear to me because after my father passed away and after I got divorced, my memory was so shot, Isolation, obsessive thoughts about the ex or past friend, and difficulty functioning. These are just a few of some of the things that you may be experiencing, okay? In fact, you may also be experiencing what we call the stages of grief as well, or some of those stages of grief. And that can range from denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. So now, what about the things that you may be grieving that you might not know you're grieving? First and foremost, the person is no longer part of your life. They may still be alive or they may not be alive, but either way, you may be grieving the lack of companionship that they once offered you and the literal connection that you had with that person. There's something called ambiguous grief, and one aspect of ambiguous grief is physical absence and psychological presence. So that means that the person is not necessarily in your life anymore. They're not in your life, but you still remember them psychologically, because our brains are not going to just forget somebody that we had a connection with, regardless of how they treated us, So another thing that you may be grieving are the routines and the regular shared experiences that you both had together. For example, with me, I'm not necessarily grieving my ex, but I am grieving the experiences we shared together, because we had some good experiences that we used to share, like going to the gym or buying good fruit and vegetables at the grocery store. It's like those moments where you may just be grieving the seemingly small everyday routines that you once shared with that person. Another thing that you may be grieving is the life you envisioned with that person and the experiences you wished and hoped to have with that person in the future. As human beings, we tend to plan ahead. You know, when someone is in our lives, they are a key part of our lives, we make plans with them. And so, yeah, it's normal to be grieving because you literally thought that you were going to be spending more time with them and you made all of these plans and you envisioned this certain future with them. So that's something else that you may be grieving. And in the same vein, you may be grieving the version of them that may have not been fully true or the version that you weren't meant to experience. And this can be a very hard pill to swallow, especially because we can sometimes project onto others a certain image that we have in our minds about them, and that image may not always be true. For example, you may have thought this person that you were with was so trustworthy, but you weren't seeing that they weren't trustworthy because you were projecting onto them that they were someone that you could trust in. But you know, in hindsight, now that they're not there anymore, you may be able to look back and say, like, oh no, I didn't trust him there. I didn't trust her there. I didn't trust them there, you know? So that's one part of this. But another part is that comes to mind is like when some women say, like, they don't want to build up a man if they are partner with a guy, right? For example, it's this notion of, oh, I don't want to build him up because and then like break up with him because then someone else is going to come along and they're going to get this built up version of him, you know, this version of him that I worked so hard to help him to evolve into. And the fact is that sometimes we break up with people. We're not always meant to have that person around forever. And we would hope that they would grow and evolve because that's what we're all supposed to be doing on some type of level. So sometimes, yes, the version of that person is not the one that you're meant to experience in the future. I hope that makes sense. And lastly, something that you may not know that you may be grieving is the good times that you share with that person, if there are any. And the craziest part about all of this is that sometimes we really have good times with people that don't treat us well, you know? And that's just the truth because human beings are so complex, you know? Like I hear a lot of people, for example, talk about their baby daddies or whatever like that and how they no longer like them and they think they're a bad parent and stuff. But the nuance in the situation is at one point they really liked that person, you know, they felt like they were having a good experience with that person at one point. And so that's the complexity of all of this too. So now that brings me to the question of this video, you know, the whole point. Why should you grieve the person you no longer love? And you know what the simple answer is? It's because you loved them. that is, you loved them at one point, and so that is why you must grieve them. Them no longer being here, no matter how poopy they may have been. I don't know if I could curse on here, but I'm just gonna say poopy, right? So no matter how poopy they may have been, at one point or another, you did care about this person, you did love them, and so that hurts, you know. That part of you must mourn that the part of you that once loved them. But in reality, you grieving this person is not even about them, it's about you. You have to grieve them because you have to let go and move forward. And you know why? Because if you don't, it actually impacts you. You are the one that becomes held back. And think about it for a minute. In cases where this person is still alive, for example, 9 times out of 10, as the saying goes, you probably let them go for a good reason. Maybe they were causing you harm, you know? And so that's actually something to be celebrated because now you've recognized your own value and worth and know that you will no longer be tolerating that behavior anymore. So this is about you. It's not about other people. Another reason we must grieve after a breakup is so that you don't harbor hate in your heart. We as human beings are not meant to harbor all of these energies within our bodies, especially these energies that are harmful and low vibrational and just detrimental to our health. Because ultimately, when you hate, you are definitely going to experience the hate on the inside, you know? And so that energy just does more harm than good. And so that's a reason that you have to let it go as well. And lastly, I would say this final reason for grieving after a breakup is to release any guilt and shame. If there's any, you know, sometimes it may not be. For example, with me, I had to ask myself, like, why am I mourning someone I chose to leave, you know? But it makes sense. I was with that person for nearly a decade, you know, that just does not go away. Of course, feelings would run really deeply because, again, been with that person such a long time, you know, a lot of memories, a lot of future plans that won't ever come into fruition. And don't get me wrong, I'm absolutely happy that I'm no longer with this person, right? And blessed as well. But again, our bodies remember, our minds remember that they were in our life, and our bodies and our minds have to separate from that person. And a lot of us that have empathy for others, sometimes we wonder about that person. A lot of the time we don't want to hurt that person, you know? And so we may feel guilty or ashamed or something like that. And so that's why we must mourn and grieve the death of the relationship, because we have to let it go. We have to let that person go, the hopes, the dreams, you know, all of those things we must put to bed now. And if you're going through this, let us know in the comments some of your reasons on why you think we should grieve after a breakup too, because it would be really helpful for people to just hear different perspectives, because I'm just one person, right? So with all of this said, grief is often complex. It's not one way to grieve. I'm going to say it again. It's not one way to grieve, and it's not a correct way to grieve. And yes, there are stages of grief, but they are not linear for a lot of people, okay? Ultimately, when we allow ourselves to grieve, we can actually end up extracting positive out of the situation. We can learn, we can grow and evolve. We can become more grateful, resilient, and just more compassionate for ourselves and other people. So you are not wrong or crazy, and I don't like to use that word, but you're not insane or crazy for grieving someone who hurt you. You are simply going through your own grief process, and it may feel a little foreign to you, but it's actually very normal. So I'm going to leave it at that. So thanks for watching. Please subscribe, like, share, share with someone who may resonate with this or may just need some reassurance about this after a breakup. Comment your experiences and thoughts about your own journey or what I said in the comments below. And let me know what other videos you'd like to see as I begin to roll out more content. As a reminder, my goal is to reach 1,000 subscribers by January 23rd, which is my birthday. Yes, Team Aquarius. And so I'm just really excited to offer more content and even more resources in the future. I love you. You are not alone. And your community is right here with you every step of the way. So in the meantime, please take care of yourself, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.